Hey guys, welcome back to the Mind Body broadcast. It's Austin and Marty, and we are going to talk about digestion today. So, this is obviously an extremely broad topic,
Hmm.
but we'll hit on some common stuff that often plagues kind of our industry, trends that we see. I mean, there's always outliers, but I think you would probably agree that there's a half a dozen to a dozen different things that we probably see on a regular basis.
That just
Um,
shouldn't be there. Like that shouldn't be a thing, you know what I mean? Or are relatively easy fixes or are ignored. When I say shouldn't be a thing, just yeah, things that come up that people either gloss over or think it's not important enough, but definitely at least yeah, I like that 6 to 12 things that are pretty easy to manage if you just kind of look for them.
right. So like we said, we're talking off the air. First off is it's kind of it's funny because it's kind of like the stages of denial where it's like first off you have to actually realize that you have a problem because a lot of times people think that whatever's going on, maybe they have infrequent bowel movements or maybe they get bloated often or whatever it might be. They think that that's just normal for them and that's just how they are, for lack of better words. So that's the first thing. Obviously, pinpoint the issue, and acknowledge that it needs fixed, because I think a lot of people walk around with digestive issues on a regular basis.
The exact term that I've seen on my assessments say, but this is normal for me, or this is normal for me, and where we can somehow go into human biology and go, no, 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 scratch this out. This is what's normal for me, as opposed to every other Homo sapiens on the planet, like you said. It's just, and it's not necessarily their fault because I guarantee you that's what they've been told by either the media, been told by maybe their mom and their dad, or just some other non-fitness person going, oh, that's fine, you could, da, 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 or you can get by, or well, you're not dead yet, or you don't have a problem yet, and it's like, ooh. Because I remember when I first started looking into digestion a heck of a lot more. I want to say 5 years ago was when I really started diving into bowel movements, gas, bloat, inflammation of the guts, candida, leaky gut, Sibo, all the stuff we're going to talk to about. Like it was mind blowing how not only, how not only, how only not how much this is ignored, but just how much this is important. Like I believe this is my first question outside of like what was your what was your weight for the week, because it dictates everything, man. Like if you get bowel cancer like that, you're done, because it's just, it affects
Yeah.
everything so much. There's not a lot of turnover time. Like you can, it's one of those ones. I have a personal friend whose father went from 6 months to 6 weeks to 6 days in a matter of a day, just because of how severe it is. So where I'm saying with this is your bowels are everything. Your guts, like that, like the gut flora, the gut bacteria. This is um, the most important thing from every kind of standpoint. If you don't digest it, if you don't digest it correctly, what's going to happen? There's going to be poor assimilation of food. Then that takes into account your TEF, your thermic effect of feeding. It's obviously your bowel movements control how much waste you're excreting, and if you don't excrete waste, it's not to the point of what some of these magical cleanses will make you believe, that 15 pounds of crap is harboring in your small intestine or whatever magic goo they have you take. But it literally is shit hanging around inside of you for too long. So that can cause problems. And if you've ever experienced any kind of severe bloat or constipation or hemorrhoids, like not only is that going to impair training, that's going to impair your life. And then the inflammation and the bloat that you'll feel, that's gonna make you look good from a cosmetic sense too. So the one of the things that I know I ask for is, are you bloated in the morning? Because if you wake up without a flat tummy, like that is probably the pinnacle of, we have some pretty poor digestion going on, because you usually have that, hopefully, like we talked in the sleep episode, 7.5 to 8.5 or so hours minimum, 6.5 or so, and you are still bloated, that we have some nightmares going on that we got to correct pretty soon. What do you see are some of the commonalities from improper digestion that your clients experience or you've just seen in the world?
Oh, well, that's definitely a good observation, because if someone wakes up bloated, there's a serious issue, because like you said, it's essentially your fasting period while you sleep. So everything clears out. I mean, if people with a little bit less minor or a little bit more minor digestive issues, they might be a little uncomfortable at the end of the day, look a little watery or bloated kind of as the day goes on. But I would say that's probably more common. As far as like actual digestive issues, well, I think for me, one of the biggest things that I see is probably, at least the biggest pitfall that I see, is people assuming that just because they eat, X, Y, and Z food, that they're okay.
Oh yeah, superfoods or anything, you got it.
Right. And so that just seems to be like, if I can get that out of their head first, then we can start. And I'm not talking from supplementation or anything. I'm just literally talking from food intolerances, whatever they might be, severe or minor. If I can get that idea of eat these clean foods and you're okay mentality out of their head, then we can start eliminating foods, figuring out what works, what doesn't. You'd be surprised. I mean, there's all kinds of foods that are quote unquote clean foods and bodybuilding type foods that people just don't tolerate very well, and are otherwise healthy. Like, they have micronutrients, they have fiber, they have all those things that you would want in a food, but we just don't digest them well. So, like I said, getting that mentality out of the head that's first and foremost. And with any digestive issue, at least for me, I try to obviously look at food first. I mean, if we can look at food, if food is the issue, if it's some kind of food choice is the issue, and we can kind of narrow the diet down to what works, that's always a good first step, and then start with our supplementation from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved how you touched on those intolerant foods. We'll say they do have some, I will say, use the term okay lists or tests available for the food intolerances, but the best test is really yourself that I've found so far. And I have, like, I do you remember the blood type diet?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
yep.
Exactly. Like, the blood type diet came out and it worked. Why? Because it was eliminating so many inflammatory foods from every single one of the blood type diets. So it was a back-end scam that was based off of, I think, little to no research, but that's what it was. And so it sucked up a crowd, and I still have people, not as often, but still have people that will mention it and say, hey, have you heard of this? It worked for me. And that's the whole thing, is that removing intolerant foods. So yes, you can go do saliva tests to go get this done. I believe there maybe even is a blood test out there now, or people that claim they can do a blood test, and it might show things up. But again, I've seen it show up things such as almonds, which, yeah, some people don't do well with nuts. And then it will show up things like broccoli. Like, broccoli is probably one of the most notorious, like you said, bodybuilding foods that gives gas like crazy, especially if it's raw. But and the way to go into that too, we can talk about a tactic already, is for things like broccoli, especially vegetables. I'll say this first. When someone says they're bloated or gassy, the first things I look into are either a carb or a vegetable, always.
Yep.
And broccoli's usually, I'll say, then show me a food journal, and if there's broccoli there, I'll say, try taking that out first. And it's just, through some weird mechanism, the body doesn't really have the bacteria or the guts, we'll say, to break it down correctly. So you can also start implementing a probiotic. I don't work for them. I love saying this, but I really enjoy Garden of Life's Primal Defense probiotic. There's the company that's been around forever, and I've seen more help from people taking one cap of that in the morning on an empty stomach than than most things. So then maybe you can be able to at least try to digest these things, because especially through bodybuilding diets, especially by running low on energy towards the end of a contest prep, your body will lose the ability to create enzymes, thanks to just it doesn't have enough friggin' power to refresh them, to keep them going. So that's also the only real time that I would recommend digestive enzymes. I'm not a huge fan of digestive enzymes in the off season outside of particular circumstances. And the reason why is that it makes the guts lazy. It doesn't actually work with the body's enzymes. The analogy I kind of like using is that the digestive enzymes of the body are like the local police, we'll say the New York PD, the NYPD, and then the digestive enzymes are like the SWAT team or the FBI. They come in and say, nah, we got this. So then the NYPD will kind of go, oh, okay, and then they'll kind of take off. And then if you get rid of the FBI, you get rid of the digestive enzymes, then everyone's already on vacation. And so now they have to kind of come back. You need to call them all back, and then you could experience weaker digestion for a bit. And then if you are using that for a contest prep, using digestive enzymes, which, like I said, is a good thing, because now you need to give them to your body because your body's not producing them efficiently, then you're not obviously assimilating nutrients, which can be detrimental. You could get sick or worse during. Your pre-contest could make you cramp worse, could do a host of things. But then when you're in the off season and your things are slowly building back up, you can slowly take the enzymes out, put the probiotics, kind of leave them in to keep everything kind of humming along. And then your digestion can get going again. But to go back to the foods, but yeah, look at broccoli. Just basically, if anything you put in your body, if you get bloated or you get gassy, that's telling you something right there. And just how we'll call it North America mentality is that people don't even really know what non-bloated or non-gassy feels like, because it's so daily part of the routine. It's almost like lower back pain, for God's sake. They just assume it's supposed to be there.
Yeah, it's funny because I think in the bodybuilding community we joke about it even more. Like,
yeah,
you're ripping protein farts, right?
Oh
like,
yeah,
haha,
for sure.
I made a post about that on Facebook, and it pops up in my memories every year, and I always reshare it. And
Awesome.
it's something to that extent about it. While it might be kind of an inside running joke in the community, it's not really. It doesn't mean you should be, stinking everyone out of the room all the time. That's not a good sign. So, like you said, as far as food elimination, since we're on that topic, I would say, yeah, vegetables always first. That's probably the very first thing I would go to also. So I definitely agree with that. And carbohydrate. Especially if somebody's eating a good amount of carbohydrates, it could just be. Well, and one thing there too is I think that's also where it's important to track your fiber intake, at least to some extent, because a lot of people, especially in like an off-season situation, if you're eating 300, 400, 500 grams of carbs, and you're eating all your typical oats, potatoes, whatever, things like that, well, then, obviously your fiber intake is probably going to be too high at that point, and that right there is going to blow you. So those would probably be the two main things. And then the less common intolerances, I would say, would be things like nuts, potentially certain protein sources, egg whites, and then I'll kind of trickle down the line to the very least common ones like meat intolerances. I mean, it's not unheard of, but it's going to be an intolerance to chicken is going to be a lot less common than an intolerance to a vegetable, like we talked about.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So just kind of we'll go down the line of what's common. Like I will go down the line of what's common down to the least common, and then once we have all the foods out of the way, I can sit down and say, okay, so now these are the symptoms that you have. So from here, what do we need to do to address it? And you mentioned probiotics, so that's kind of a cool topic because we can obviously get probiotics through food. I would say that most people probably don't eat a lot of probiotic-rich foods. You're talking about cultured dairy products are a big one. You know, that's what we've always heard, yogurts, things like that.
Right.
And there are other, you know, fermented foods, certain foods that are, I mean, you could really ferment a lot of things. Like I don't know if you saw, I actually had been making fermented hard-boiled eggs on my own.
Oh, were you? That's awesome. Cool. No, I didn't. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I tried it. It's actually super easy. You just basically have to seal the jar and let them ferment, and you know, with like culture starter packs in it, yeah, and they're pretty good. So, but anyhow, most people aren't probably doing that, and most people really aren't getting many probiotics in their diet. So, if I know that, if it's somebody that I'm working with and I know that they're not, then we'll definitely introduce a probiotic product. And then the biggest thing with the probiotic products, they're so hit or miss. And I think that's simply because of, well, two things: delivery system, and then how much live culture are you actually getting when you get the product.
Exactly.
So, yeah. And you mentioned the Garden of Life. I really like that brand because I had a guy that, one of my clients, he had pretty much, you know, a disposable income, we'll say. So he was able to try a lot of different things. And we went up and down the line on these different probiotics, and he went clear up to like the BSL-3 products. I don't know if you know those.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Right. So we're talking, which the VSL-3s, for anyone that doesn't know, that's more of what you would call like a medical grade for people that maybe they had an infection and they had a lot of like large antibiotic use or something, and we're trying to replenish the gut flora quickly. But what I noticed was, as potent as those were, the Garden of Life actually stacked up to pretty much everything else that I noticed, and a much lower. Like he was noticing pretty positive results with just the 5 billion CFU product, which is pretty low.
That's right. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, like just that whole, like, I don't want to go too far off on that, but just their whole product line, outside of some of the really out there ones, but like their enzymes, which is called Omegazyme. Their greens product, if you're into that kind of stuff, like they have been awarded more certifications, more good manufacturing progress or process. They've been more tests, more everything, and it's always, and I mean always, came back beyond on point. Let's say, just I've been using them, I want to say, for 10 plus years now for the health stuff. Just like it's just a shame they don't do individual minerals and vitamins, because I'd probably get them from them too. Like, they are on the pricier end, but I think I paid $80 Canadian, which would be like, what, 2 cents American?
Not quite.
Yeah, right. For 214 days. Like, their bottle right now is 214 caps. It's like on a bonus from their 180. So $80 Canadian for for more than half a year. That's very reasonable to have great guts year round. I think that's, but so just to put it in perspective for you. But yeah, definitely on the like you said, there is too many that come either in a crappy packaging, crappy delivery system. They're dead by the time you get there. Like, it's just a it's not worth cheaping out on. Is definitely don't go buy like we'll call it I don't know if it's Jameson or whatever, some of the Walmart brands or whatever. Just as a whole, a lot of that stuff is either the wrong attachment to it. Like, I know the zinc is pretty poor that's in there. I know the magnesium's always oxide, which is probably the worst form of magnesium. So just for your vitamin game out there, ladies and gents, I would just pick a little bit more better of a brand to go with that stuff for sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal you from there, Austin, but yeah, then probiotic you go to next, and then kind of what do you do from there?
Yeah, well, it's, before I get off that topic, there was one other thing that and I don't know how far you've gone into the probiotic thing, but I did. You went on Joe's podcast. You talked on Joe's podcast not too long ago, probably absolutely. A couple months ago. I did one on there we talked about gut flora, and
perfect.
There's a ton of new research in gut flora now. And I'm not up on like every single little thing, because there's always new stuff. But for the most part, the gist of it is that they're actually doing studies where they're taking gut flora from certain people and implanting it into other people, and they're looking at the effects, or they're using, rat models or mice or whatever that they use. But they were doing fecal transplants. Have you heard of these?
I very briefly heard of it, but I didn't know anything other than it was for exactly that it was for probiotic bacteria culture in the body, the flora, like you said. Like, yeah, tell me a bit more about that.
So this is where it gets really interesting with the gut, and especially with the gut flora, is that and I'm sure you know this too. Like your gut is lined with neurons, and it's basically like your brain. Sometimes the people will call it your second brain. So you're getting signals from your gut also throughout the body for different nervous system. What would you want to call it? Nervous system functions.
Right.
So obviously, if your gut's inflamed, if you're bloated and blah, 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 you're not going to feel very good. So, I mean, anyone that's been really bloated or constipated or things like that, you know how it kind of makes you grouchy. Like you're foggy, you're not as productive, you're not normally in a very good mood. So that's kind of where that whole thing comes from. But what they did with the transplants is they took the healthiest gut flora that they could find, what they considered a good balance of good and bad bacteria, and they transplanted the good into someone that had the bad. And essentially what they found was not only, obviously, like their digestion improved, that was a big thing, but their behavior completely changed. So they were taking people that had like people that were on the autism spectrum, for example. This is huge.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were taking people that were on the autism spectrum, or like severe ADHD, behavioral things like that. And they would transplant, and then essentially what would happen is they would notice that in the person that got the transplant, their behavior would start to mimic the good person more so. So they would basically, all of the symptoms would improve just from transplanting the gut flora.
That's bananas. I have believed so firmly in the guts control everything for such a long time, but that this is more ammunition. Like, that is super, super cool.
Yeah, it's really wild. I mean, I'm definitely, like I said, there's some stuff out there now. Like there's I'm trying to think of the name of the company. I can't off the top of my head, but they do gut microbiome testing where you could actually give them a sample and they would test your gut flora. But I don't think, at least from what I've heard, because I'm kind of weird. Like, I'm always curious about that stuff. So I'm kind of a hippie when it comes to doing all kinds of weird testing and shit. I just find it intriguing. But I haven't done that one yet. So I'm kind of waiting to see until it gets a little more advanced, because from what I understand, that once you get the results back, like it doesn't really give you a ton of good information. They're basically keeping your results for research.
Right. Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah. So maybe something I'll do in the future, but I thought that was extremely cool because I had done tons of research on it and started stumbling upon all of these studies. And it was just like, holy cow, this is amazing. And then I started realizing, like, paying attention to my clients, because we look at the gut flora and just gut health in general for digestion. But then I started asking them other things like, how is this affecting your mood, your productivity, your sleep, anything? And they noticed that all of that was also improving as their gut health improves. So that right there tells you, the gut and the brain are definitely connected, and they're definitely working together through those neurons that are lined in your gut. So that's why it's just vastly important to take care of these things.
Well, you have to think, right? And that, like you said, you started on the extrapolation there, but the take home is that we can improve, obviously, our own gut flora, our gut bacteria, our digestion period. So there is more fuel to the fire for that. As I will tell you that I had the exact opposite case of that in terms of my digestion was terrible, bloated, gassy, farty, all the above during university. And the last thing I wanted to do was study. The mental clarity was gone. It just didn't happen, right? I was eating 3 meals a day of pretty much whatever the heck I could shove in me quickly that was ready, because that's all I was doing was studying. Sometimes it would be tuna and salad if there was bulk tuna available at the salad bar, but you grabbed what you could. Whether it was casserole, and as you know, those aren't exactly the most freshest ingredients at some of the meal halls in universities and colleges. So, but like, yeah, and I do say that to people. They're like, oh, I'm so busy during school. I'm like, listen, and I didn't even know about this, just how powerful it was until you just told me. And I still will recommend, say, listen, eat well, eat. We'll call it bodybuilder well, because it does. There's always that fog that'll be about you. Go eat a bunch of crap and go tell me how you retain, we'll say, knowledge. Because for me, it was just like, I can't believe, not that I wasted university. I still, absorbed a lot, but I can only imagine what it would have done then, because exactly proof to the point, when I'm beyond on my micronutrients, when my digestion is on point and things are feeling good and I'm not into too hard of a contest prep, like you can do so much. It's kind of crazy what you'll remember, what you'll retain. It's the best time to study, best time to have a course. So if you don't want just, we'll say, aesthetics and health purposes, but like, that's why this is called the Mind Body Broadcast, right? Because that will enhance the mind. Like in the mind, and the emotion center controls everything that the body doesn't. The body is kind of the last, like what gets the aftermath type. What gets paid last. So you take care of the guts, which will clearly take care of the brain, which will take care of the body. So you cannot ignore it.
It's pretty wild, because it's a hard balance, because a lot of people are really busy, and especially people that, if they own their own businesses, or they have really important jobs and positions that are stressful, you are super busy. So, but what most people don't realize is they start skimping out on things like stress reduction, sleep, their gut health, for example, and they work more hours, but they're a lot less productive. So it's like, it all goes back to, you can function properly, you're going to feel better, you're going to be more productive in less time, and so on and so forth. So, going beyond the gut flora, since that's actually, that's a huge topic in and of itself. What are some other common things that you notice? I can definitely name several, but what would be something else that you would look for right off the bat?
Well, it's definitely, like, outside of, okay, infrequent bowel movements. Like, let's go with this. Most people really don't try to look into how many bowel movements should you be having a day. The commonalities that I've seen are either one every day or one every second day, which is obviously greatly unexaggerated, we'll say. But I would say it's the times where I have eaten the best and I've paid nutbag attention, is what I like to call it, or way too much attention to it, when I was borderline measuring salt, borderline measuring potassium, vitamin C. It was meal in, meal out. And it was creepy how much it was meal in, meal out. Like, I would start eating about 30 minutes after I ate. I would have to go to the bathroom. And if I was eating 6 times a day, it was 6 BMs a day, because it will become like this little perfect factory that kind of chugs along and kind of makes room for the next meal. It was crazy. So that's, we'll say, perfect digestion would be, in an ideal world, it's meal in, meal out. So that's definitely something that I would look into first, is just the amount of bowel movements. I would say, if people are, like, especially during contest prep, yes, I can understand that there is potentially less waste, more of the food is being used, especially if the food is, we'll say, healthy. The term clean has been kind of bastardized now, but so then it can go down to like 1 or 2 a day at the butt end. Even then, I still don't like it, and that's when I'll usually implement the digestive enzymes and keep the probiotics on pretty heavy. And then look into mineral supplementation, such as magnesium and things like that. But outside of that, but yeah, you nailed it on a lot too. Is just the food themselves are the number one thing to look for. And it's funny you mentioned eggs, because that's the bodybuilding staple, right? Is egg whites. Not only do they fill you up more because of their volume, but you can potentially drink them. I know there's way too much going on with the controversy about that. I have drank pasteurized egg whites and it felt great. I have felt no kind of the adverse side effects, yet the next person can kind of feel terrible. I've seen that it's about 50-50 for digestion, that with eggs, even the yolks. So that's one thing. If you don't digest eggs correctly, that friggin' sucks, man, because you're missing out on one of the most voluminous bodybuilding foods, or just foods, period, that you could possibly be having, right? But
who doesn't eat like it? Who doesn't eat like an ass load of egg whites in prep because you can eat like a pound of them at once?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, and then I definitely look for the over fibering or the under fibering, or then I'll scroll down to their, where I usually have at the end what supplements they're taking and in what quantities, and I'll look for either like a stool softener, I'll look for a fiber supplement, because I have seen the fiber supplements do a heck of a lot more damage, let alone the powerful prescription ones, than they do good, because some of those things can rip apart not only your digestive tract in terms of potential lacerations that that are not desirable in the least, but overfibering can cause dehydration in the bowels, which can therefore cause constipation. What's that? A fiber supplement causing constipation? Yeah, it happens way more often than not. And so the quicker I can get people kind of off their fiber supplements, if they can, sometimes there are medically needed for whatever kind of wacky reason that's going on, but elimination of that is key. Taking a look and see what fiber they are getting in terms of the balance between soluble and insoluble, and then obviously things like protein bars, like with the I forget what it's even called, like that man-made fiber. It's not maltol, but it's
you're thinking of all the oligosaccharides, like the fructo-oligosaccharides and the corn fibers, which they're soluble, like basically they're soluble fibers that are sweet tasting. That's why they add them. But
yeah, exactly.
But yeah. So with the fiber, real quick before we get off that topic, because that's kind of an interesting one, because like we talked about before the show, a lot of times people have digestive issues, and maybe they're working with a coach, for example, and they just say, okay, well, you need to take a fiber supplement. And the most common one, I think, is probably over the counter would be a psyllium husk supplement, which like Metamucil, or I'm pretty sure that's psyllium husk based.
You got it. That's exactly it.
So maybe we can touch a little bit on just the two, because you have insoluble and soluble as your two main types. And I think a lot of people don't really understand that they are a little bit different from each other. They do different things. And you might need, like in certain situations, I would say for the most part, if I have someone supplement with fiber, I try to use a blended product that has both. However, there might be situations where if it's still not right, then I might even ask them, like, okay, what's the consistency of your bowel? Is it really hard, or is it really soft, or is it you having problems passing it, or whatever? And then I can see, all right, you need more soluble, or you might need more insoluble, because the soluble will absorb the water. So that's, a lot of the supplements, like I said, the psyllium husk, a lot of those are soluble. And they'll absorb the water. So if you have like a really watery stool, then that could be something that you might need. That would help them bulk form, because it's going to absorb the water as it passes through the GI tract. And then the insoluble would be like vegetable cellulose, the really, really hard stuff you would get in stuff like celery or lettuce. So that doesn't digest. It's completely indigestible. It will pass through. And that's the stuff that's going to basically scrape your GI tract, like, scrape through, clean it out. And there might be situations where I know someone just needs insoluble, and I'll literally just have them take a little bit of vegetable cellulose. It's super cheap. You can get it in powder form. It's pretty much tasteless, but for the most part.
So what are the signs that you would look for that would say, hey, I think you need some extra insoluble?
I would say in that case, it would just be like they're not passing bowels, like constipation normally.
Right.
But if, constipation, just general constipation, assuming that when they do go to the bathroom, like let's assume that their bowels are relatively normal when they do go, they're not like super watery or anything. I would say we probably just need to push it through with a little bit more insoluble, a little bit of like like your grandma would call it roughage, you know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, so and that could be food. I mean, I might do it through food, but the only issue I have with that, with having people eat like a bunch of salads or something, is if they're already constipated, that's probably not going to be a good idea. That's probably going to bloat them more. So I might have them add the powder. And with any fiber supplement, I always have people start low. Start at add 5 grams of fiber a day and see how you feel.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't need to be some big bolus of
Right.
like 15 scoops of Metamucil. That's right.
And you shouldn't. You probably shouldn't do that because you're not gonna, it's probably gonna make you even more bloated initially until you get used to it. And if I do have to have someone supplement with more than like 10 or 15 grams in a powder form, then I would always tell them to split it up.
Right.
Don't take it all at once. But in general, yeah, those would be your two main types of fiber, and then kind of why you would need each of them. Do you have a go-to fiber supplement that you like if people have to use one?
You know what? Funny enough, I usually start out with magnesium citrate or magnesium chelate. Just from the whopping amount, especially if it's during prep, because it's one of the more, we'll call it, neglected micronutrients. It's not necessarily the first line of defense, but something that I'll look into, and then I will definitely go into just see where their salt and potassium are at too. I found that it works kind of miracles, right? Because it's thanks to, I think it was the 80s and the 90s where we're so salt phobic. Just that now proper hydration isn't there, which again will lead to constipation. So the water's just kind of flowing through there, not really doing much, and it's not hitting enough in the bowels. It's going right to urination. So that's probably one of the bigger things that I will look into, especially off the hop too. If it's kind of slowed down, because sometimes people will get a little bit too nutty with their water. They'll jack up the water to the 4, 5, and 6 liters of water a day without balancing out the micronutrients, which will then flush them out. And also vitamin C, too. I know that through a backwards method, I ended up taking way too much vitamin C, and I'm sure you know what happens when you have too much vitamin C is it causes ridiculous diarrhea. So, so even adding in something like 1 or 2 grams of vitamin C can really make a swift change. Let's say that way. But let's put it this way: I'll never use Metamucil. I have used some stool softeners, potentially just because it's what they'll have available right now. Like for the vegetable stuff, it's like we don't have a ton of that around locally, so I will get that in for them for sure, and I'll definitely move that up higher on my list. I didn't know that you would use it as readily, but that's awesome. Like I just learned something. That's perfect.
Yeah, it's the brand I think is you can get this one on Amazon. It's called Nutricology, and it's dietary fiber. It's dietary cellulose fiber. So. And it's literally like $8. So I mean, even if I know you guys' stuff's a little more expensive, so it might be $10 or something.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean it's pretty good. So that's funny. So with the magnesium and the vitamin C, so let's say I'm glad you brought that up, because I'll get in situations, I'm sure you get there too, where digestion, like in prep, for example, we're real close to a show. We don't always have time to sit there and go through a giant process of elimination and, do all these things to completely get it right. And sometimes you just have to Band-Aid it for a minute, unfortunately. So those things like magnesium, vitamin C, I know for me, there's a product, there's actually a product that Life Extension makes, and if they can get it quick enough, it's called I have some. See if I can pronounce it. Effervescent C, vitamin C with magnesium crystals. And it says right on here, fast acting colon support. And it really does just that. So,
okay, really?
Yeah, so that's kind of along the same lines. And then if someone's in a pinch and they just need to run to the pharmacy or something, then yeah, a stool softener, or even just like milk of magnesia, which is basically just magnesium hydrochloride.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's probably be my go-to if we really need to, or let's say they're just really uncomfortable. Like we need to have they need to have a good bowel movement, and then we can start fixing the issue. And because they're going to feel better when they have the bowel movement.
Exactly.
So start there. If all else fails, then like a mild laxative, you could use like senna. Like senna leaf works good. That you can get that in, because I know a lot of people like that super dieters tea. They like to use that leading up to the show to help with bowel movements, and that's what that is. That's just basically senna leaf is all it is.
Yep. I believe the other one's called like sennakraut or something like that as well. Is a popular brand or something like that. I forget the exact name of it, but yeah, it's a little box with a small blue label on it. But yeah, any of that stuff. Again, like that's situational is kind of what I want to hammer home here. Like that is exactly like you said. That's a band-aid. That is quick fix for like right now, and then obviously the other stuff is what's going to need to be there to make sure that we don't run into those literal road bumps along the digestive highway.
So going beyond the whole fiber thing in the bowels, let's talk about some of the sneakier stuff in there that people don't really think about. So bacteria overgrowth, stuff like candida,
right.
For example. So maybe because you seem really passionate about that before we started the podcast, so I'll let you kind of introduce those things.
Well, yeah, and definitely mostly about Sibo, which is short for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and it's just a flat out way to say inflammation of the small intestine, because it happens so often that it's just when we eat poorly. Usually forms of a high sugar diet. Sugar causes a lot of havoc on the body in a sense of it needs more stomach acid to get things going. And this is another we can talk about this a little bit mildly too. Is that the body needs stomach acid? So where this fascination with antacids has come from over just for immediate relief? Again, it's another Band-Aid, right? It's a Band-Aid that doesn't really help you out a heck of a lot in terms of
it makes it worse.
It makes it worse. 90% of the prescriptions that are given for high stomach acid are actually low stomach acid. And I want to say it's either 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 where a client has been on Tecta or some other form of very powerful antacid, and it's when we've kind of got them off of it in a sense, they're mind blown that it was that they needed more stomach acid. So sugar and carbs in general, they roll around in stomach acid and they leach it like crazy, which then therefore can cause acid reflux, heartburn, which basically just means that they need more stomach acid because the food is getting backed up. And people just that's why pregnancy acid reflux or pregnancy heartburn is such a thing, because now their stomachs are pushed out of whack a little bit to the side, and then it's just hitting their throats a little bit quicker. And people are mind blown when you tell them this, and how like supplements like I keep forgetting how to pronounce it. It's a betaine or betaine.
Oh, betaine.
Betaine. There you go. Betaine hydrochloride is almost a direct mimetic. I think it's hydrochloric acid is another one, or something like a hydrolonic acid. Is a direct stomach acid enhancer too. I know it's very bro and it's out there a little bit too much now, but even using a couple tablespoons of apple cider vinegar down the hatch can help with that as well. It works with the stomach acid to help create the more of the acidic pH. So Sibo is caused by all these things over time, and unfortunately, and like dairy is another one too on that list, where dairy can either be great or can crush you. I think it's something like 90% of people have some form of dairy intolerance. I really like to limit it during contest prep, just because I'm not a dairy hater. I'm a dairy if you can tolerate it. So yeah, exactly, right. And and if I do, I like to have people use it at the end of the day, so you do have the night time to digest it. But so why am I mentioning dairy now is because it does not require stomach acid to evacuate the bowels. And actually think about putting acid on dairy. It will coagulate. It's like if you put protein powder and try to heat it up in the microwave type of thing, right? It's not going to work that well. You're going to coagulate. You're going to get a lot of bloat, a lot of gas, severe discomfort. So so all of that kind of fun stuff will create this overgrowth in your guts, and it can be get rid of by supplements. It can get rid of by just eliminating a lot of the foods like that, getting the stomach acid back in check. I know there's two supplements I like peppermint oil extract. I think it's called Eccentric Coated is the one I use. It's by I think it's by Now. It might be from Now, but anyways, it's a different bottle than their usual orange ones. But one of those in the morning with your probiotic or without it. I actually take out my probiotic just to kind of go in there with the nuclear bomb, and that will blow up everything. It's one of the essential oils that when consumed really do frigging work. And I actually have something full disclosure podcast, we'll call it. I get something I like to call them the Listerine farts or the Listerine poops, and that's when I know to stop my peppermint oil, because now it feels like literally like peppermint has been slathered on my butt. But then that means you're kind of fresh and ready to go for new bacteria. In that it works outside of all the supplements out there. There's lots of different ones you can we'll say employ, but that one works the best. And then you can kind of refresh with that, right? And then things like beet juice, natural beet juice, can really help get the guts going again, like outside of the caloric value to it. Carrot juice, fresh raw carrot juice can get the going too. You can kind of dump that in the morning along with the probiotic just to get more of the better cultures going. But like it's one of those things. Sibo is the easiest way to tell if you have it, is if you have that weird little paunch at the bottom. Like it could look like a spare tire. It's not always a spare tire. That could be fat. But let's put it this way: I would look at getting rid of Sibo first if you are a candidate for like high sugar, high carb, high intolerable carb, high dairy with the carb type of diet. I would look into it just because I've kind of, in peppermint oil is frigging cheap to get at, by the way, too. And then outside of cleaning up your diet is that there should be no bloat. There should be no physical looking bloat. There should be no puffed out stomach like that. At rest, your abdominal column should be straight up and down, not with like a waving little bump at the bottom, which is that an inflammation. Especially even over the obliques, you can see it too. Like there's some guys will have really good obliques. Maybe it could be from training the obliques too hard, but it's frigging inflammation. Because just because bodybuilders eat, the way that they quote unquote should, or maybe they shouldn't, but inflammation is still real. Same thing with candida, which can lead to like it thrives in high sugar environments. Like I don't necessarily know if I know or believe in too high of the candida detoxes and stuff like that, but it's stuff that's there that's caused from eating poorly, and we'll say very poorly. But with Sibo, unfortunately, it can be wrecked pretty quickly if you're prone to it. It's one of those things that I've seen people have a very poor free meal or cheat meal. Let's say like they had an all dairy cheat meal, or they had high dairy with like 5 bags of fuzzy peaches cheat meal, and they wake up and now they have borderline Sibo again, or they have that bloated belly for at least a week, which you can, like, that's what I mean. One meal can wreck that progress, right? And you don't always, and this is by no means me saying go out and have that meal and then, oh, I can just take my peppermint oil. Same thing with cheat meals. Oh, I can just take my digestive enzymes. No, people, that is not that is not the fall off the cliff and then use a rocket pack to get back up. Eventually the rocket pack's going to make you not land where you should, because I don't think all of us are geniuses at rocket packs in a sense. And plus, it's still falling off the friggin' cliff. It's telling your body to make up its mind. It's not going to like doing that much. So yeah, that's my spiel on Sibo and how to kind of look for it and how to kind of just, negate it. Say, if I was one of these people dieting like this, maybe I should look into it.
There you go. That's awesome. I like the mention of the betaine. It's funny because the whole antacid thing, I think the acid reflux, and especially once you get into some of the bigger guys that are eating, a lot of food and really high protein diets, I do start to notice the acid reflux a little bit more there, the indigestion. But normally they go to the doctor, they're given an antacid, whether it's whatever strength that they're given. And when you actually look at what they do and how the body reacts to them, typically you're going to have a rebound from them. So if anything, you're going to end up making the issue worse. So if you were to take them and then stop taking them, essentially you're going to have a nasty rebound. You're going to have a lot more acid reflux. And a lot of the time, these people are actually, like you said, these people might actually have low stomach acid. So adding in that betaine HCl, that's the one that I use. It's called, I'm trying to think, I think mine's Now Foods brand. It's betaine HCl with pepsin. It's what comes in it. And they're like 600 milligrams, something along those lines. But if you guys want to try this, something that you can do, there's a little way you can kind of self-test it on your own, is the dosing on this is super variable. I mean, I've seen just vastly different doses. I've had people that would take a couple of them a day, clear up to like 4 to 6 per meal.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So you can mess around with this, and what you'll notice is I would just keep increasing, just slowly increase them. Maybe take one a meal for the first day, see how you feel, see if everything digests more efficiently. You might notice, I would say you would notice faster gastric emptying. Like everything's basically just digesting more efficiently and quicker. You're hungry quicker, and so on and so forth. So see how you feel, and then maybe increase it to 2 capsules, and then 3 if you need to. And like I said, I've had people up to 4 to 6 a meal that have really poor digestive acids. That's not really common. Like most people really don't need that much, but the betaine's pretty cool because with that, you'll get absorption of nutrients goes through the roof because all those vitamins and minerals that you probably weren't absorbing before, now you're absorbing again. And I know I had this issue personally with certain things that I was actually deficient in as far as vitamin wise and mineral wise. And I kept thinking, I'm like, man, I'm getting this stuff through my diet. I know I am because I'm getting, like, I've kind of battled with anemia, both iron deficiency and B12 deficiency. So, which is just odd. Like that's,
right.
You wouldn't think.
Yeah, that is odd.
Right. Exactly. You wouldn't think someone that's eating meat and that's eating these high iron foods and these high, B12 containing foods that they would have that. But it really came down to assimilation issue. And it has, the betaine has helped me a ton. So I do 1 to 2 with every meal. Right now I'm at 2 per meal, and that's pretty much a sweet spot right now. And I feel, it makes a pretty good difference. And the stuff's not expensive, and it comes in, you can get huge bottles of it. I just bought I think I just bought like a 600 capsule bottle or something absurd like that. So, you can mess around with that too. That's a good thing to include if you have the indigestion or stomach acid issues.
Yeah. Like it's kind of crazy. Like, have you tried the apple cider vinegar trick?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's wild, man. Like it's like and I believe, so this is my theory, and I haven't publicly said this yet because I don't want people jumping on Marty said it's good for fat loss because here's the thing is that it's the new coconut oil, right? It friggin' will raise your children for you and make you money, for God's sake. So apple cider vinegar, they're saying it will help you with belly fat. Well, no, what did I just tell you about Sibo? So it flattens your frigging stomach, right? I almost said something different than friggin' because it flattens your stomach. It will help your digestion, which could potentially help your caloric burning. You can just tell in my voice, right? Like I love this stuff because the more it gets out there, and it's not a secret. Like, why would we be telling you this for free? In a sense of, this isn't a paid podcast yet, but we want you to know this because it will make your life endlessly easier. And now with the whole fecal transplant friggin' thing, like that's still blowing my mind.
Yeah.
If I seem distracted here, it's because that's blowing my mind still. That's what they were going after, right? Because I've always believed that stuff, Austin. That's so cool. That just it's literally everything. And I don't know much more to say about that, but like the if you don't digest your food, you are not going to assimilate the nutrients correctly. I don't know how to say it more bluntly other than that, or even awake and go into it more, but it controls everything. When you don't have those minerals like I talked about, maybe you are consuming adequate sodium, potassium, but it's not quote unquote getting there thanks to too much fiber is scraping it along, or you took too much vitamin C and everything's getting whipped out of the digestive tract too quickly before things can get absorbed, because that is so imperative to your cognitive function, let alone your bodybuilding function.
Yeah, I would agree. It really dictates everything. Like anyone that's gone from really poor digestion to even moderately okay digestion, they just know the difference that it makes in everything. I mean, everything down to how they feel, how they look, how they function on a daily basis. So I think we covered a lot of the main things that I can think of off the top of my head that I would see. There are, as far as supplements go, we touched on some stuff. There's a lot of little obscure things that you can add in, but for the most part, we touched on most of it. And in reality, if you can nail the foods down and you can get the gut flora down, maybe it's through probiotic or food or whatever you need to do, right there you've pretty much got 90% of it under control.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. That's really the long and short of it for the most part. And then unless you are just maybe it's a genetic thing, you just are deficient in something. Maybe it's you need that betaine HCl, or you need some digestive enzymes or minerals, for example, like we talked about the magnesium. So I would say, which by the way, I know I didn't talk about it as much, but that's actually a staple. I pretty much add that in just about everyone's supplement regimen in some way, shape, or form. So
yeah, I love what you said there. I want to make sure so I don't forget it, but I love what you said there, and I'll say we'll say a blanket term will be eliminate things before you add things.
Right.
I love that. Just look for the foods that are probably causing you the biggest wreck. The way to test that really easily is wake up fresh in the morning and have that one particular item. Literally wake up and have a 1 cup of broccoli and just see what happens. And that's the number one way to test if it's bad for you. Wake up, have a cup of egg whites, and just see how it sits. Eliminate it. Don't have it with anything else, because that can convolute it, and you're back to the guessing game again, right? But for instance, I'll see on a check-in after meal 3 I'm bloated. I'm like, okay, what's at meal 3? And then we'll take a look at it, and then I'll say, oh, and then if there's a usual suspect there, do that. And it could potentially be, I've seen this. Sometimes it's more so headaches, but sometimes artificial sweeteners can bloat you, but definitely overconsumption of things like Walden Farms and other things can, when you turn it into your own food group. That's kind of my blanket rule for my clients is don't turn a condiment don't turn a condiment into a food group, because that stuff is man-made, and it will go in there and go, hey guys, what's happening, and we will mess up stuff, right? So even if it is 0 calorie, which it isn't, we will get into that some other time with the macro one we got cut. This is perfect. This is all flowing into what I want it to,
there
Austin. Right? Yeah. That's where we'll call it the death of if it fits your macros. IFYM and macro dieting is digestion. Everyone all of them seem to ignore it. They seem to say, oh, the gut microbiome, that's a bunch of crap, and it's almost always from elite genetically steel metabolism guys and girls that could down a baguette drenched in tartar sauce with 15 boxes of Pop-Tarts and have still 6 poops a day are the ones that are saying this. But anyone else outside of that 0.00001% that has a regular digestive tract with usually at least a couple intolerances, if it fits your macros on the bastardized way, which is the whole, literally, if you just make it meet your macros, you can do it. The first thing I would say is the guts that don't deal with it well, and then obviously people ignore their micronutrients, which that's what we're going to dive into next time for sure. But I like that a lot. Eliminate before you add in. And I forgot to mention too, what's really popular up here, what I have people do is use sauerkraut in the morning. Yeah, it's gross, but that's the a very easily accessible, common fermented food up here. You get the one in the fridge. Obviously, you want it to be alive. You don't want it to be on the shelf. So don't go run out and buying the sauerkraut you see on the shelf. It's got to be in the fridge so that it's alive. And what I do is I have a forkful or two. That's all I call it, because measuring that stuff is a friggin' host of problems. I have a forkful or two. I just kind of put it in a blender and I down it because I really don't care for the taste, but it has trillions of prebiotic and probiotic in there. Just like, I think kimchi, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. So kimchi is another one. And like Austin said, he makes his own homegrown pickled eggs straight out of
Yeah.
Ohio. So that's that. But that's it. Yeah, I think that was awesome, Austin. I don't have much other to say other than, like you said, there is some nuances out there. We could have talked about things like IBS and Crohn's, and I do see that often, but IBS is even more so a basis to basis thing. I have seen inflammation happen in my IBS clients out of the blue. I know Crohn's is even more so out of the blue. One of my best friends has it, and it's he bodybuilds with it, believe it or not. And sometimes he's laid up for 3 or 4 days straight, and he has meticulous journaling about everything. It is more meticulous, I think, than friggin' Dorian Yates's pre-contest runs were, and it still will just happen out of nowhere. So that one's we are not doctors in that regard, but for IBS, it's just even more so knowing your foods, and you are just kind of have to be hyper vigilant. And I'm not putting down you IBSers out there, but if you choose to not be hyper vigilant, it's gonna happen, and yeah, it is gonna suck. But I think if I had any kind of severe intolerance, well, I'm pretty darn lucky on the digestive scale. I'll call myself. I'll say about an 8 out of 10. A lot of things don't really bug me. But if I were, I know that I would be even more so on top of that like crazy. Yes, you are going to have more of a limited diet in a sense, but it's not worth some of those, we'll call it episodes or just flare-ups or anything, because that apparently feels like the worst turkey post-contest bloat you could ever have is apparently an IBS flare-up. So it's just kind of, we'll say, what we all talked about here kind of pushed up an extra level in terms of hyper-awareness.
I'd say the only one thing, and I'll make this quick because I don't want to go into it too much, that I didn't touch on was, because we talked about the stomach acids in like the betaine and stuff, and that helps mainly with stomach acid and protein digestion. And you talked about the carbs, you talked about what the sugar's doing in your gut. The only thing I didn't really talk about, and I only say this because I'm someone that I do like to add dietary fats into people's diets. Like, I know some people, they still haven't got the memo that fats are good.
Yes.
In certain situations that fats are beneficial, and that, for obviously there's health benefits to certain fats. But if I'm adding a lot of fats into someone's diet, the only thing that I would probably watch for, if you're one of these people, is that it obviously slows your digestion down. Of all the macros, the fat's digesting very slowly, and it can slow you down. And you might, in some cases, assuming your fat intake goes up quickly, you might not produce enough bile acid to break it down. So supplementation wise, this is a super easy fix for a lot of people. If I'm introducing more fats into their diet, I'll use usually one of two things. That's assuming their liver's healthy. They don't have any kind of crazy liver disease or anything. I'll introduce ox bile. Works really well. That works. That's one that can be used. And the other is, it's from Jarrow Formulas. It's called D-limonene. It's actually, and this, I think this is, people don't even know this, but everyone started drinking lemon water for their liver, right? And everyone's thought they started doing this. And I don't think most people realize that this D-limonene, that's actually the main reason that it's benefiting your liver, because it's helping with the bile acids. So basically what this is you're getting that benefit concentrated into a capsule. And that is one of my favorite supplements for fat digestion. And it's for two reasons. Because for one, it's concentrated. And secondly, it's like $8 or $7 for 2 months worth. And it makes a huge difference in digestion. So
definitely link me that in Messenger here after this. That's awesome. I've never heard of that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's just bile acids. So that's the main thing for fat digestion. Make sure your liver's pumping out those bile acids to break those fats down. One way you can tell is obviously just really slow digestion with the fat intake, and then also look at your stool. If your stool's getting kind of a tan color, then you might realize that you need some more bile acid. But outside of that, pretty much. I mean, I think we hit all the heavy hitters.
Yeah, no, that's good for me, man.
Okay.
Well, then, from everyone here, obviously, Austin and Marty at the Mind Body Broadcast, that has been Digestion for you, and we will see you next week.
We'll see you guys.